Allah with the other part with Surah Yusuf, and this is exactly where we left off at. وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ يَتَبَوَّأُ مِنْهَا حَيْثُ يَشَاءُ. So we talked about how that in that segment of the story in where Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam refuses to leave prison until the truth about his honor and the truth about the plot that those women were plotting against him is revealed to everyone in public, and that he would come out with all his izzah, with all his dignity, all his honor exposed, rather than him looking like somebody that was a felon or a person that was in prison for committing a crime. And of course, we talked about how Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, the king, said, "Ituni bihi astakhlisu li nafsi." In other words, bring him to me, and that he's going to be somebody that I will be choosing. In other words, a very close person to the kingdom itself. فَلَمَّا كَلَّمَهُ قَالَ إِنَّكَ الْيَوْمَ لَدَيْنَا مَكِينٌ أَمِينٌ. So when he talked to him, he said, today you're going to be makin. Makin meaning that he is going to be in a position of power. In a position of power, and not only in a position of power, but in a position where the king himself actually trusts him. قَالَ جَعَلْنِي عَلَى خَزَائِنِ الْأَرْضِ. And this is really important, just to bring about that lefta, in where Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam was in a position where he had totally lost all power. Lost all power at one point, lost the power within his family, lost the power with his father, lost the power when we're looking at connections and people's connections. There's a certain power that you have in people's hearts. There's a certain power that you have within your family. There's a certain power that you have within the community. So Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam lost the power that he had with his father. He lost the power that he had within his family, and where his own brothers actually threw him in the well. He lost the power within the community, and where he was becoming, or where he had become nothing but a slave. And not only a slave, you can have expensive slaves and you can have cheap slaves, but شَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ, that he was even considered one of the cheapest slaves. He was just really in a place where he had no dignity whatsoever. And number 4, which is that he had no power. He had no power even within the kingdom itself, where he even lost the power of even his male dignity in front of a woman, that was attempting to plot and seduce him. And then he even when he had evidences to prove his innocence, he still didn't have the power, and ended up being locked up in prison and amongst the lowest within the community. Now everything is flipping, where not only does he have power, but he was even part of those that were trusted. Look at this, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَالَ جَعَلْنِي عَلَى خَزَائِنِ الْأَرْضِ, or here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give power. Yusuf as an example in the story, يَتَبَوَّأُ مِنْهَا حَيْثُ يَشَاءُ, that he will not only have that power, and in fact here when he actually chose which power he wanted to be in, على خزائن الأرض, in other words, be the treasure, but he was even choosing which type of power he wants to be in. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comments on that, نُصِيبُ بِرَحْمَتِنَا مَن نَشَاءُ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would gift. Nusib is like it's going to be like a gift, and where it is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would grant with his mercy whomever he wills. وَلَا نُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not, nudi'a here would not necessarily mean to get lost or lose, but would also mean to neglect as well, in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will consider every reward, whatever good the muhsin had done. And it's really important to remember that the word muhsin is at pretty much the highest level of iman, because the levels of iman, you've got the iman, you've got the Islam, you've got the iman, you've got the ihsan. So a level of Islam is pretty much the foundation, the basin that you consider Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your Lord Almighty, you believe in the prophets, the messengers, etc. But the level of Iman, in the level of Islam, maybe I can write it down and just annotate just a little bit so you could actually see it. So in the level of Islam, we talked about this before, in the level of Islam, the person pretty much has the main foundation of putting certain things into action, but that's like the fine line. That's just pretty much the minimum, in where they're doing their salah, they're doing their zakah, they're doing their hajj, they're doing their siyam, etc. But the level of iman is at a higher level than that, because the person, not only are they putting certain faith in action, but they're actually going beyond the limit. They're going beyond the limit, the minimum of their action, and where they're actually letting that iman sink in their hearts. So the iman sinking in their hearts, where they believe in Allah, tu'mina billahi wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa rusulihi wal yawm al-akhir wal qadri khayrihi wa sharrihi. That they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the angels, the books, etc. But you could see that it's a certain faith in the unseen, that sunk deep in their hearts. And the level of ihsan is a different type of iman, in where the person had totally absorbed all those different sides of Islam, that in fact they're starting to even worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if they could see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, their iman, their faith had sunk in so deep in their heart that that nothing else was going to add more faith to them, because it sunk so deep to the point that they could actually worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if they could see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا نُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that for these muhsineen, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to lose, is not going to let go, is not going to neglect their reward. And in that sense, we would understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that ajr al-muhsineen, is the reward for the muhsineen, is not only in the akhirah, but it is even in the dunya, in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says and relates that what happened to Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam is actually part of the reward. What happened to Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam in dunya, in where he got into a certain prestigious position, that he was in a position that he himself had chosen, and that was a result, that was the payback that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala paid him in this dunya. وَلَأَجْرُ الْآخِرَةِ خَيْرٌ, and that reward of the akhirah is even better لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, for those that are believers, وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ, and those that fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is also telling us that the reward that here he was given was in this dunya, but the reward of al-akhirah is even bigger than that khair, and it is even better than that reward of the dunya that one may seek. لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, it is given for those that are believers, وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ, and those that actually have taqwa. Now the level of taqwa is probably within Islam and Iman, but it's a different level, in where the person, they have such deep Iman in their hearts, that they would even abstain from things that are normally halal, they're normally okay to do, but they're abstaining from it because they fear that might have something that might affect their heart, something that might affect their iman without them realizing. So they're looking at the consequence of that action, even though it actually in itself might be halal. وَجَاءَ إِخْوَةُ يُوسُفَ فَدَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِ فَعَرَفَهُمْ وَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ. Now this is now starting a different scene within the different scenes that we talked about in Surah Yusuf. Now this is taking us into a different scene. Now this is outside of the previous scene that we were discussing earlier, which is Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, this trial, he leaves the prison, the king grants him a certain position, so that was a totally different setting. Now here, this is a new scenario, this is a new scene. جاء إخوة يوسف. Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam's brothers, they came in. فدخلوا عليه. They entered. In other words, he was there, he was watching, and remember, he is considered the treasurer. He's considered, he's doing all these different management within the government, and specifically the area that has something to do with economy, the treasures, the different things. فعرفهم. But he was able to recognize him. He did not recognize them. وهم له منكرون. But they didn't recognize him. So why did he recognize them? Remember, they were older. And when you're young, the changes that of your appearances, they actually change a lot more as you grow older than when you're in your youth, and more hair probably just add on their face or stuff like that. But the general appearance is pretty much the same. So it was easier for him to recognize them, but it was a lot harder for them to recognize him because of the amount, the change that he had gone through from that early childhood into right now. An older man, a man that has fully grown in their jaw, in their heads, in their body. Total difference. وَلَمَّا جَهَّزَهُمْ بِجَهَازِهِمْ. So Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, he kept something in there. وَلَمَّا جَهَّزَهُمْ. When he prepared, جَهَّزَهُمْ بِجَهَازِهِمْ. So it seems like Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam was being aware of how there was lack of management within the government, to the point that they even forgot him in prison. There was no record keeping. Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam was doing something else, in where he was even under his governance, he was even keeping track of the people inside the government. That every single person was there, who was the record keeping of even newborns, record keeping of all the different things, and even providing human services. Well, let's see what he was doing. قال ائتوني بأخ لكم من أبيكم. So Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, was he just keeping track of everything? Why didn't they recognize that he knew something that other people didn't know? And they weren't suspicious of anything. But Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam says, well, here they're coming for some kind of human services, some kind of food services that the government was providing. Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam's suggestion in how we need to manage food, we need to manage the intake and the outtake, and how things are set. So he says, "Ituni bi akhin lakum min abikum." There's one more person, and that is the brother, your paternal brother. In other words, your stepbrother from your father's side. I need you to bring him along. I need him to be present. He wants to. ألا ترون أني أوفي الكيل وأنا خير المنزلين. Don't you see that أوفي الكيل, meaning I would give an abundant amount, a good amount, and a good share for those that are coming in. وأنا خير المنزلين. You could see the fairness, you could see the justice. وأنا خير المنزلين. You could see that during me being in office, me being in charge, that things are different. So they still weren't suspicious. They still weren't suspicious, but it seems like the reason why they weren't suspicious is because they recognized, they had heard that under this power, under this new authority, that things were actually being in record, that things were under management. It was a different management. That's why they didn't get suspicious yet. فَإِن لَمْ تَأْتُونِ بِهِ فَلَا كَيْلَ لَكُمْ عِنْدِي وَلَا تَقْرَبُونَ. If you don't bring your brother, فَلَا كَيْلَ لَكُمْ عِنْدِي, then we're not going to give you a share, at least for him. We're not going to give you the share, and don't even get near this area. In other words, don't save your time, save your effort, don't even get near, because if you don't bring us all the rest of the family members, you're not going to be able to get a share of that human services that we were granted you, and you're not going to be able to get his share. We wanted to make sure that all the different family members are present. They still didn't get suspicious, but where was it? قالوا سنراود عنه أباه. So they just said, they knew that their father Yaqub alayhi salam was not going to give in that easily. So they just said, they're talking to themselves, talking amongst themselves, and they just said, قالوا سنراود عنه أباه. They said, well, Nurawid is like, we'll try to talk to him, we'll try to, convince him to give us anhu abah. We'll try to convince his father to give us our young stepbrother. We'll probably, maybe we can get somewhere there. وقال لفتيانه. Now Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam was, he's letting them, he just said one word. And this is really important, that it is part of the wisdom. Don't use too many words, especially if you are in a position of leadership. Because the more you speak, the more likely you are going to make mistakes and people will catch you with your words. And that's why the Arab used to say that every single person is hiding under his tongue. Every single person is hiding under his tongue. So look, he didn't say anything. He just said, get your brother. Well, you could say we're going to give you a fair amount, a good number and a fair amount of goods, but just bring them. He didn't say anything. He didn't discuss. He didn't negotiate. He just said that and next. But he kept it in there. Now he's working his way. وقال لفتيانه جعلوا بضاعتهم في رحالهم لعلهم يعرفونها إذا انقلبوا إلى أهلهم لعلهم يرجعون. So now Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, of course, he's the leader, he's right now the top minister. He just told them, قال لفتيانه. He said to the workers, the fityanihi, could be slaves, it could be the different workers that were working for him. He just said, اجعلوا بضاعتهم في رحالهم. He said, keep their بضاعتهم, keep their share, keep their goods inside its sacks. في رحالهم, inside the sacks that it's supposed to be given to them with. لعلهم يعرفونها إذا انقلبوا إلى أهلهم لعلهم يرجعون. Notice that Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam still didn't even tell anybody. He just kept it in his heart, and he's planning. He said, keep their goods in their sacks. Maybe they'll recognize it. إذا انقلبوا إلى أهلهم. Once they come back, they're going to be hungry. They're going to come back to actually get their items. إذا انقلبوا إلى أهلهم. Once لعلهم يرجعون, they may come back. He didn't rush. And this is something really important, and especially women. It is part of our own nature that we rush to get things, that we rush to get the fruit of things, to get the result of things. That rushing can put us in a lot of trouble. It is part of our instinct that when we want something, we want it to happen fast. We want the fruit of it fast. We can't wait. We just, if we want it, we can't. We're always lahuhin. We always have that ilhah. We're always insisting, I want it now. And this is, subhanAllah, maybe it has something to do with anatomy, within our brain anatomy, in where, and even when it comes to talking, women are usually, straightforward, in a hurry, rushed to compromise, give in. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let the wali be in charge. And if you look at the ayat, always talking about the wali to be in charge, and always talking to the wali, get them married and such, get them this, if you do talaq, this, it's always talking to the wali in a way to help the women not rush their matters. They need that those breaks to help them not go with their acceleration and compromise really fast, to be slower in making those decisions. So here he said, فلما رجعوا إلى أبيهم. When they came back, that is Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam's brothers, when they came back to their father, قالوا يا أبانا, they said, dear father, منع منا الكيل. They prevented us from getting the share, the items that we went therefore. فَأَرْسِلْ مَعَنَا أَخَانَا نَكْتَلْ. So this would mean, well, because we did not have the rest of the family members present, they actually prevented us from taking any of that share. They prevented us from taking anything, any items. So فَأَرْسِلْ مَعَنَا. So just bring our brother with us, naktal, and that way we can get a share. In other words, we'll get the extra share that is for my brother or for our brother. وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. And we'll make sure that we will take care of him. وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. So why are they saying وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ? Because they know that their father had really lost his trust in them because of what they had done before. So they said وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ, like we will for sure. So لَحَافِظُونَ, this lam would mean that they were using all their power to convince their father that they're going to be careful, that they're going to take care of him, that they're going to make sure that he is safe. So Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam responds, قال هل آمنكم عليه إلا كما أمنتكم على أخيه من قبل فالله خير حافظا. Now here Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam says, هل آمنكم, am I going to trust you as the way that I have trusted you on his brother before? آمنتكم على أخيه من قبل. Remember the way I trusted you even on your brother before? I trusted you for his brother before. فالله خير حافظا. Now Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam seems like he's starting to give in. فالله خير حافظا. He's just reminding them of that moment. Remember when I had already trusted you before, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm trusting Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm going to depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and still I don't trust you. I still don't trust you, but I'm just going to depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm going to put my trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. Because He's the most merciful one. In other words, it's kind of like saying, it's not you that I trust, but I'm just going to depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing else that I can depend on. But I'm just going to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be the most merciful and actually be the one to preserve my son. And this is really important, that when we make dua, you always relate it with the right name. So for example, if you want children, you call out unto Razzaq. If you want rahmah, if you're going through illness and you want mercy, or you're going through hardship and you want support, you say that you call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the name Al-Hafiz. If you want some kind of mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you say Rahim. And every single name has a different connection, has a different reflect even on your heart. وَلَمَّا فَتَحُوا مَتَاعَهُمْ وَجَدُوا بِضَاعَتَهُمْ رُدَّتْ إِلَيْهِمْ. So now the story goes farther and faster and says, it very clearly that وَلَمَّا فَتَحُوا, they opened up their sacks, they opened up their items. وَجَدُوا بِضَاعَتَهُمْ رُدَّتْ إِلَيْهِمْ. They had seen that their items are safe, nothing was taken from it. And قالوا يا أبانا ما نبغي هذه بضاعتنا ردت إلينا. It's like, look, even our items, they're all safe. They're all safe. They didn't take anything from it. And you could see that even though they took it on a side, but everything is the same exact way. In other words, this is a government that we can trust. This is a person that we can trust. That they said that they were going to give us more goods. Well, we can trust them because we could actually see that even our items were given to us with no decrease whatsoever. وَنَمِيرُ أَهْلَنَا. See, look, they're giving him an evidence. Look at the items, and plus وَنَمِيرُ أَهْلَنَا, we'll bring another share and we'll take care of our brother. وَنَزْدَادُ كَيْلَ بَعِيرٍ, and we'll have a whole load on top of a camel. Actually, an extra share. And ذَلِكَ كَيْلُ يَسِيرٍ, and this is it's going to be easy to bring with us, and it's going to be a good amount. قال لن أرسله معكم. But Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam was still hesitant, insisting, I will not send him off with you. حتى تؤتوني موثقا من الله لا تأتونني به, until you bring me an evidence. But here's one thing, it's not really evidence per se, it is more that it seemed like it was part of their culture back then, that if you make an oath, if you make a yameen, if you make an oath, that you actually make the oath by bringing some evidence to prove that you made that oath. So, for example, that Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam says, "Tu'tuni mawthiqan min Allah." You bring some kind of a document, you bring some kind of evidence, and at the time they used to, let's say you made an oath, Wallahi, I'm going to do such and such. What is the evidence that you really mean that? So they'll probably give them a ring to remind them, their own ring, or probably a document to remind them of the different things that they had promised, or at least made an oath for. من الله لتأتونني به. What is the mawthiq that he wanted? They wanted them to make an oath by the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they will bring him back. إلا أن يحاط بكم. Except or unless there was something يحاط بكم, there was something that is beyond your ability. Maybe people invading you, maybe you get robbed, something that is beyond your ability. I'm not going to hold you accountable for that. فَلَمَّا أَتَوْهُ مَوْثِقَهُمْ. So then he asked for a mawthiqan min Allah. He asked for an oath from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they would do. By Allah, we're going to do such and such, we're going to take care of him. So then they did do what he had asked them to do. أَتَوْهُ فلما أتوه موثقهم قال الله على ما نقول وكيل. So then they brought their موثقهم, they brought the oath they brought the oath that he had requested, that you would say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you promise, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that's going to be watching you for this, which is what a yameen is, which is what an oath is. قال الله على ما نقول وكيل. They just said Allah is going to be witnessing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be the one that will be our warrant in making sure that we're not going to betray in this. Now, وقال يا بني, وقال يا بني, then he said, يا بني, oh my dear children, لا تدخلوا من باب واحد وادخلوا من أبواب متفرقة. Don't enter from one door and enter وادخلوا and enter from multiple doors. Why? There could be a number of reasons to why he wanted to do that. Number one is that it could be because he was in fear of envy or hasad to happen to these brothers. There are 11 brothers entering from one place, pretty much dressed the same, and it's going to be an envy. They're grown men entering, they're all brothers. That must be a great izzah for that family. So the Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam was giving them every advice that he can, even if it was the advice on how to enter a place. Or it could be that he told them to enter from different doors, that he was afraid that people were going to be suspicious of them. Remember, this is a whole fortress here, and if all the brothers dressed in a certain way, 11 brothers were dressed in a certain way, coming together, the guards might be suspicious. What are you after? Why are you coming in? Are you trying to plot something? They'll be suspicious. So he said, go into from different doors. That way you won't look suspicious and probably get attacked in any way, or they might think you're spies or anything like that. وَمَا أُغْنِي لَكُمْ عَنْكُمْ مِنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. And in the end, مَا أُغْنِي عَنْكُمْ. That مَا أُغْنِي. What is مَا أُغْنِي? Meaning that I cannot whatsoever protect you from anything from anything, even from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I cannot protect you from anything. And in the end, min shay. I can't be the one to be there for you at all times. But it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is the supporter. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is the preserver. مَا أُغْنِي عَنْكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِن شَيْءٍ. And min shay is like not even in anything. In the end, put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the end, consider Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be the one there for you. And when things happen outside of our abilities, there's absolutely no way that I can help you and get you out of those problematic situations that you may be in. In al-hukmu illa lillah. In al-hukmu illa lillah. Because at the end of the day, when we look at in al-hukm, meaning that not only legislature, but in al-hukmu illa lillah, meaning that the different patterns in this world are actually under the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That even if he's a prophet, he doesn't have the power to change the different things that may lead to the certain or specific consequences. So for example, he's actually telling them that, you gotta take the different means, the different measures to lead to different consequences. Because there are certain patterns in this world. There are certain things that I cannot control. For example, you decided to study, then you're increasing the probability of you succeeding, or at least you passing. You decided not to study, then you are increasing the probability of failure and failing. Same thing. You decided that not to take the certain measures. Even a prophet cannot change those different rules, those general paradigms that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in this world. And this is really important to keep in mind, that even if it's a prophet himself taking the measures that are on earth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created in this world, is actually part of this whole system. If you want to change the consequence of a certain system, you want to change the consequence of a certain in your life, then you gotta work on changing what leads to a different consequence, what leads to a different result. So right here, in al-hukmu illa lillah, they're emphasizing, the Prophet is emphasizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that's ruling all this. Created the rules, created the paradigms, created the cause and effect, all that. Alayhi tawakkalt. I'll just depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after taking the necessary measurements, to keep me safe. وَعَلَيْهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُتَوَكِّلُونَ. And every single person that is depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should consider Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not their own selves. Why? Because you can depend on your own self and realize that you're just as weak as anybody else. But you have to take the necessary measurements, and after taking the necessary measurements, you actually put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَمَّا دَخَلُوا. Now the scenario, the scene goes into a different one. وَلَمَّا دَخَلُوا مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَهُمْ أَبُوهُمْ. Now they're obeying their father. What did they do? When they entered from the place that their father had ordered them to enter from, meaning from different doors, they're obeying their father. مَا كَانَ يُغْنِي عَنْهُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِن شَيْءٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizing that their father was not going to be able to protect them from anything unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the protector. إِلَّا حَاجَةً فِي نَفْسِ يَعْقُوبَ قَضَاهَا. It was only that there was something in Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam's heart that he wanted to do his utmost, whatever it takes, to make sure that his children are safe, that his children are not going to be put in any situation where even Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam is not going to be able to protect them unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects them. وَإِنَّهُ لَذُو عِلْمٍ لِمَا عَلَّمْنَاهُ. Meaning that he was given, that he had ilm, that he had knowledge from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had taught him. Meaning what? That part of that ilm, part of what he had taught them in how to enter a place, how to make sure that they keep any type of suspicion off of them, etc. That this is part of the ilm that he was given. That this is part of the ilm that he was given. In other words, to seek changing a consequence by taking the necessary measurements. لَذُو عِلْمًا لِمَا عَلَّمْنَا. This is part of the wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam as a prophet. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Yet most people don't realize one, that Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam and what he was advising them with was actually part of his prophethood, was actually part of the wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him. And most people don't recognize that to change the consequence of certain things, that you gotta work on the start of it, what results to something. Most people would just want to depend on their own selves or depend on hope, but don't realize that there is a pattern that you have to work with. You can't expect change if you don't work on the necessary measurements and actually see the different experiences and learn from the different patterns to change the consequence of things. وَلَمَّا دَخَلُوا عَلَى يُوسُفَ آوَى إِلَيْهِ أَخَاهُ. Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam is watching. Looks like he was all there, looking at every single person that was entering the place. Every Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam was the manager. He was on top of everything. What did he do? He recognized that they actually came in. دخلوا على Yusuf. They came in. آوى إليه أخاه. The second he saw his brother, آوى إليه. So آوى إليه, he couldn't wait to get his brother near him, close to him. But then it seems like he took him away. Go inside, took him to a different, آوى إليه أخاه, took him somewhere else, like, I need you closer, took him somewhere else. And away from their sight, he told them, إني أنا أخوك, I'm your brother. فلا تبتئس بما كانوا يعملون. Don't go into sorrow, depression for all that they were plotting, all that they were doing. In other words, he's now confining. It's a secret. I know what they were doing. Don't get carried away. Wait. لا تبتئس. Don't go into depression. It seems like there was more to the discussion, but that Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam's brother, he recognized, and it seems like there was a moment where Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam آوى إليه أخاه, he was hugging him, embracing his brother. Who knows how they practice a type of embracement, but آوى إليه أخاه means that he was getting closer to him physically, and even in the discussion he confided in him, you're now safe, don't worry. فَلَمَّا جَهَّزَهُمْ بِجَهَازِهِمْ. Now it was time. They were looking for the different services. It was time. Here it is. We got our brother. You wanted the rest of the family to be present. We got the rest of the family. Now it was preparing all the goods and the items that they were supposed to be taking with. فَلَمَّا جَهَّزَهُمْ بِجَهَازِهِمْ. When they prepared all the goods that they were supposed to be taking with them, which is what they had come for, جَعَلَ السِّقَايَةَ فِي رَحْلِ أَخِيهِ. He put a siqaya. It seems like it was a precious item. It was a precious item that the king would drink from. It was like a vase or something like that. في رحل أخي. He put it in the goods that belonged to his brother, his biological brother. ثم أذن مؤذن. Then one أذن مؤذن, meaning somebody called out. One of the one to make the announcements, made the announcement, أيتها العير إنكم لسارقون. He's talking to the people. Somebody stole one of the king's items. قالوا وأقبلوا عليه ماذا تفقدون. They just came and said, what's going on? What are you missing? What's missing here? ماذا تفقدون? What's going on? What did you lose? What are you looking for? قالوا نفقد صواع الملك. They said, well, we're missing here صواع الملك. صواع الملك is like one of the king's utensils. ولمن جاء به حمل بعير. Announcement is called الجعل. They said, whoever brings the king's utensil, the king's item, we will give them an extra himl, an extra good, an extra share of the goods. وَأَنَا بِهِ زَعِيمٌ. Prophet Yusuf ﷺ, and I'm here, I'll do that myself. What does that mean? So when you actually say, and you're talking to, the group of people, and if the leader said, I'll make sure that أَنَا بِهِ زَعِيمٌ, like I'll make sure that this actually happens, and that the person that found the king's utensil would be under my supervision. As here, the minister, it will be under my supervision, that I make sure that they will take that himl, that they will take this huge share. قالوا تالله لقد علمتم ما جئنا بنفسد في الأرض. They said, by Allah, you saw that we did not come to bring about any destruction on earth. وما كنا سارقين, and we didn't steal anything. So they said, okay. قال فما جزاؤه إن كنتم كاذبين. Said, all right, so what would be the punishment if you are liars? If we discovered that you had lied and that you had taken the king's utensil. قالوا جزاؤه ما وجد في رحله فهو جزاؤه. The one that you would punish, whoever the item was found in the king's utensil, was found in their items, then you would punish the one that actually stole it. كذلك نجزي الظالمين. كذلك نجزي الظالمين. This is how those that oppress, those that transgress the limits, are going to be punished. فبدأ بأوعيتهم قبل وعاء أخيه. So then, فبدأ, and of course there's another tafsir is that قالوا جزاؤه. So they, not the إخوة Yusuf, but the king, or those that are in leadership, they said جزاؤه, like whoever it is found in his items, then he's the one that's going to be punished. And this, as a kingdom, this is how we're going to punish those that transgress the limits. فبدأ بأوعيتهم قبل وعاء أخيه ثم استخرجها من وعاء أخيه. So then, what did he do? Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, and of course فتيانه, they started searching بأوعيتهم, started searching in their utensils before searching in his brother's items. ثم استخرجها من وعاء أخيه. Then he got it out of his brother's utensils. Well, of course, because he put it there, but he wanted to see what how they're going to react to this. كذلك كدنا ليوسف, meaning as the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam was given the wisdom to create and make even the plots in order, what here of course a good plot, it's not a scheme, but in order to prove something. ما كان ليأخذ أخاه في دين الملك إلا أن يشاء الله. ما كان ليأخذ أخاه في دين الملك إلا أن يشاء الله, meaning دين الملك would mean the legislature, so that he wasn't going to harm his brother even under the king's laws, إلا أن يشاء الله, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it. نرفع درجات من نشاء, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would elevate, the different levels of whom he wills. وفوق كل ذي علم عليم, a moment to consider, a word to remember. No matter how far you went with your knowledge, no matter what degrees you had, in the end there's somebody that is going to be more knowledgeable than you. There's somebody that's going to be more knowledgeable than you. قالوا إن يسرق. So they said, now here what happened? Now they discovered, or Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, what did he do? He basically found the item inside his brother's items. Well, it's not he found, but he got it out to show them. قالوا إن يسرق فقد سرق أخ له من قبل. So they said, well, if he had stolen something, well, his own brother also stole something before that. In other words, it's in their genes. It's in his genes. Him and his brother, they anyways have. It's probably within their genes that they just happen to be evil and just take other people's items. فأسرها يوسف في نفسه. Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam just stayed quiet, didn't say anything, didn't respond, didn't rush to respond. ولم يبدها لهم, didn't say anything. And this is part of al-hikmah. This is part of al-hikmah. Not every single time you have a word to say, you necessarily get it out of your system. Not because you have something to say, or even if you are right, it doesn't mean you go and say it. Sometimes choosing the right time to speak, in fact, choosing the right time to speak is actually part of the hikmah in knowing what to say, when to say it is part of that wisdom. It is part of that wisdom. Not because you have something to say, it doesn't mean go and say it. وَلَمْ يُبْدِهَا لَهُمْ. He didn't say, he didn't reveal it to them. He didn't reveal any response to them. قَالَ أَنْتُمْ شَرٌّ مَكَانًا. Now, he didn't say anything, but he said, you know what? You're even more evil. Now that they're starting to show all those different things about their plots and their schemes, he said, Antum sharrun makana. You're even in a more evil place. Wallahu a'lamu bima tasifun. And Allah Almighty knows what you're talking about. قالوا يا أيها العزيز إن له أبا شيخا كبيرا. Now notice that they decided, you know what, we're not going to go to this person that just accused us of stealing and just called us evil. We're going to go to the president himself, to the king himself. Ya ayyuhal aziz. Now they're going to the king himself. It's like, we're not going to deal with this man. Who? Yusuf alayhi salam. They still didn't recognize him. Ya ayyuhal aziz. They just went to the aziz. They went to the king himself. Inna lahu aban shaykhan kabira. He actually has an older father. فخذ أحدنا مكانه. Why don't you just take somebody instead of us, instead of him? So take one of us instead of him. إِنَّا نَرَاكَ مِنَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. You seemed like a good man. You seemed like somebody that will do good. قَالَ مَعَاذَ اللَّهِ أَن نَأْخُذَ إِلَّا مَا وَجَدَنَا مَتَاعَنَا عِنْدَهُ. So what did the king respond? He said, مَعَاذَ اللَّهِ. It's like, we seek refuge in Allah. أَن نَأْخُذَ إِلَّا مَا وَجَدْنَا مَتَاعَنَا عِنْدَهُ. The only one that we're going to be punishing, and in other words, imprisoning here, is the one that we found our items in his things. Inna idha ladhalimun. Or else this would mean that we're oppressors here. فَلَمَّا اسْتَيْأَسُوا مِنْهُ خَلَصُوا نَجِيًّا. Then when they had lost hope in convincing the king to take one of them instead of their brother, خَلَصُوا نَجِيًّا. They started whispering to one another. قَالَ كَبِيرُهُمْ. The eldest one of them again said, أَلَمْ تَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ أَبَاكُمْ قَدْ أَخَذَ عَلَيْكُمْ مَوْثِقًا مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَمِنْ قَبْلِ مَا فَرَّطْتُمْ فِي يُوسُفَ. Then the eldest one of them said, didn't you know that you had أَلَمْ تَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ أَبَاكُمْ قَدْ أَخَذَ عَلَيْكُمْ مَوْثِقًا. Remember that you had promised, you had made an oath and you let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be the witness over you, and even before مَا فَرَّطْتُمْ فِي يُوسُفَ, when you had even ما فرطتم في يوسف, and when you had even let go of Yusuf, فلن أبرح الأرض حتى يأذن لي أبي. So the eldest one said, and I'm not going to leave this place until my father would give me the permission to leave. أو يحكم الله لي, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would decide and determine or decree a certain matter, maybe my death, or maybe something will change, but I'm not going to go back to my father after doing this for a second time. This is it. وَهُوَ خَيْرُ الْحَاكِمِينَ. Because he is the one, he's the best ruler. In other words, now he's feeling like, what can I do now? ارجعوا إلى أبيكم فقولوا يا أبانا إن ابنك سرق وما شهدنا إلا بما علمنا. So a group of them, they said, well, ارجعوا إلى أبيكم, just go back to your father, let's go back to your father, فقولوا, and say, يا أبانا, oh father, your own son actually stole something, وما شهدنا, and we're not witnessing, but we were just told بما علمنا إلا بما علمنا, we were just told this is what they told us, وما كنا للغيب حافظين, and we don't really know what happened behind the scenes, we have no clue whatsoever, but this is the situation. واسأل القرية التي كنا فيها, and ask the city that we were in. In other words, if you need witnesses that we didn't plot anything, ask every single person that was in that town that we were in. وَالْعِيرَ الَّتِي أَقْبَلْنَا فِيهَا, and even the caravan that came with us, ask them, did we do anything wrong? وَإِنَّا لَصَادِقُونَ, and we're just honest, we didn't do anything. قال بل سولت لكم أنفسكم أمرا. Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam said, بل سولت لكم. بل سولت, like verily, for sure, there is some matter your nafs had brought in again, another delusion. فصبر جميل. Now Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam is being tested again. فصبر جميل. This is beautiful patience that I'm going to have. Beautiful patience. Why? Because during that moment, he didn't. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ, meaning what? I'm going to have beautiful patience. What is the beautiful patience? There's a patience. There's the patience that you can have on the inside, but the patience that you have on the inside may actually be that you have no choice. But the sabr jameel, that beautiful patience, is when you don't go after those people or those reasons and keep on bragging about it. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. Preserve your patience. Preserve your patience and make it beautiful. عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَأْتِيَنِي بِهِمْ جَمِيعًا. So now Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam is saying, maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring them all to me. Look at this. Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam was still having that hope that one day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring them all, Yusuf and also Benjamin. إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْعَلِيمُ الْحَكِيمُ. He's the one that is most knowledgeable and all-knowing and all-wise. وَتَوَلَّ عَنْهُمْ. He just couldn't handle it. He wanted that sabr jameel, but part of that tawalla anhum. He just had to go away and just find a little corner for himself. Just didn't want to go into further discussion. Couldn't handle more talk with them. وقال يا أسف على يوسف وابيضت عيناه من الحزن فهو كظيم. And he started saying, يا أسف, oh my sorrow, على يوسف, on Yusuf, and his eyes turned white from all the sorrow. In other words, the depression, the sadness, the sorrow, the feelings that he was in were so strong that they even affected his physical ability. His eyesight was actually affected from all the sorrow. In other words, when we talk about sadness, we can't just think of it as just a psychological thing. So the psychological aspect of it, even if it's a prophet himself, it can affect somebody's physical ability, even if that meant their ability to hear, their ability to listen, their ability to see. And Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam's ability to see was actually affected. min al-huzn fahuwa kadhim. It was actually affected. His eyesight was affected from the deep sadness that he was in. فَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. That he was in such sorrow from the trauma. The trauma has deeply affected him. Even though he's a prophet, even though he had faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at the end of the day, we're all human. We're all human. And we can have our hope. You could see that he had hope. That he said, maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring them all to me. He had hope. But the sorrow, the trauma of losing now 2 sons, it actually affected him. And now he's even in that deep sorrow. قَالُوا تَاللَّهِ. Now they saw his physical the impact it had on his body. And when he actually says, قال يا أسفا على يوسف, when he remembered his own son, so then they said, قالوا تالله تفتأ تذكر يوسف. Are you still going to talk about and remember Yusuf and still going to talk about Yusuf? حتى تكون حرضا أو تكون من الهالكين. Until you start and until you become extremely ill or probably even die. Are you still going to talk about Yusuf? Look at the effect it had on your body. قال إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله. He said, I'm just complaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm just complaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وأعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون. And I know things from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you don't know. In other words, just go away, leave me alone. And here he's just saying, I'm just complaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's all I'm leaving it to. And this is really important, to preserve your honor. Don't complain to people. Don't complain to those that are around you. You can have a friend that's listening to you, but you gotta learn how to complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Share your sorrows with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't share it with people. 90% of the people don't care, and another percent of the people will be there just to do that shamata, just to enjoy seeing you suffer, and a very small 1%, if not even less, will be there to support you. But even those that will be there to support you are not going to be always there, because the people that will give you the support it's important, but at the end of the day, they are as human as you. We're all weak, but we just happen to know how to sometimes reveal our potentials and our powers to people in order to make ourselves be strong. But the reality is, we all have our weaknesses. We all have our weaknesses. So here, to move on, يا بني اذهبوا فتحسسوا من يوسف وأخيه. Now, Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam, because he says, وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, he still has it there in his memory that Yusuf alayhi salam was going to be something big. He doesn't know how. He doesn't know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making this outside of his presence, outside of his power, outside of his authority, but he still has that hope because he remembered that dream. So he says, Ya bani, my sons, idhabu, go, fatahassasu, it's like look for every single sign, any sign for Yusuf and his akhi and his brother, any sign. Tahassasu, it's like use all your senses, all your energy, all your power to find Yusuf and his brother. وَلَا تَيْأَسُوا مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ, and don't lose hope in Rawhillah. And Rawhillah in meaning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's powers. Min Rawhillah, from the powers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّهُ لَا يَيْأَسُ مِنْ رَوْحِلَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. Because the only ones that will lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are those that are the ones to deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's powers. Those are the kafirun. The ones to deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's powers are going to be the kafirun. Now, فَلَمَّا دَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِ قَالُوا يَا أَيُّهَا الْعَزِيزُ مَسَّنَا وَأَهْلَنَا الضُّرُّ وَجِئْنَا بِبِضَاعَةٍ مُزْجَاةٍ فَأَوْفِ لَنَا الْكَيْلَ وَتَصَدَّقْ عَلَيْنَا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَجْزِي الْمُتَصَدِّقِينَ. So we'll end right here, and next week inshallah we'll continue when they go back to the king. And then they ask from the king, not from Yusuf alayhi salam, because they felt that he was not liking them somehow. They felt that there was something that he was not going to be comfortable with them, because he already told them, Antum sharrun makana, you've got some evil things in you. So here, they didn't go to Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, even though he was the head of all those distributions, the one that is responsible for this, but they actually went to Al-Aziz himself. We'll continue next week, inshallah, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. I enjoy, I know that most of us actually know the story, but I actually enjoy reading and retelling the story because it lets us live it, and it lets us take that moment that we revive these stories and those connections with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in how we see the different matters in our life, not from a materialistic connection, but from a deeper connection. That connection where you're connecting yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not to the materialistic matters in your story. We could easily get carried away and just connect with the surface of things on the story. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us how to relate every side of our story with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah yarda ankum jami'an, and Bishara as well. And jazakumullah khairan everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.